Thank you to Found for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Found is a banking app that makes the financial logistics easier for self-employed entrepreneurs, and I'll tell you more about them later. Hello, welcome back. If you don't know me, I'm Anna Yudin. I am a doctor of clinical psychology and an author, and today I want to talk about the basics of setting up a clinical private practice in the year 2024. So to give you a little bit of background on my own journey, last year I graduated from my doctoral program and pretty much immediately set up my private practice. I was able to do this because I live in a state where associates can actually open up their own PLLC and practice under it if they have a supervisor. Even though I didn't have psychologist licensure, I was able to do that. I'm a very organized person. I love lists. I love knowing exactly a checklist of what I need to do in order to finish a big project like opening up a private practice. And because of that, I feel like I really got my ducks in order, and I want to share with any of you out there that might be thinking about opening your own private practice, what are the things to make sure you get off your checklist. Just a little bit of a disclaimer, everything that I'm about to talk about is just a jumping off point. You're going to need a lot of consultations in addition to this video to make sure you cover all your bases. Legal, financial, marketing, all that good stuff. This is not a one-stop shop. Definitely still make sure you are seeking out that type of counsel. Let's just get right into it. What is the very first thing to consider when you're thinking about starting your own private practice? I think the very first step is thinking about, is this the right choice for you? And is the timing right? So starting with, is this the right choice for you? I'm assuming if you've gotten to a point where you're considering opening your own practice, you probably already know this, but there are definitely differences between being in private practice versus being in other settings like inpatient, partial hospitalization, and so forth. Being part of an outpatient agency like connected to a clinic or something of that sort. But that's the first thing to sort of ask yourself is, do I want to go into private practice? And then the second thing is, do I want to go into my own private practice or stay in a group practice or somebody else's private practice? Now, if you open up your own practice, there are some pros and there are some cons. The pros that come to mind, first of all, you get compensated better. If you are the one taking care of expenses related to the services that you provide, you end up getting a bigger cut than if somebody else was doing that behind the scenes and they could just tell you, oh, well, we're paying for all these expenses, but you don't know exactly how much those expenses are worth, and you know that they're pocketing a good amount, a good percentage of the work that you're doing for that company. So better pay is definitely possible in private practice. Also, I think you have a lot more independence to seek out your ideal client. When you're working for even another group practice, even if they are super aligned with types of presenting concerns and populations that you want to work with, there are going to be people that walk through the door that maybe aren't the best fit for you. And when you're in a group practice, you don't have as much agency to say, well, actually, I don't think this is really going to work. I don't think this is really a type of person I would enjoy working with, because you're doing the work in part to bring money to the group practice. Whereas when you're on your own, you can be very intentional about screening people to make sure that they are the right fit for you. And if they're not the right fit for you, there's no one that's going to mandate that you see them. You also have a lot more independence to make your own hours, make your own schedule, go on vacation whenever you want to go on vacation. A lot of group practices will say, well, yeah, you can take vacation whenever you want. It's just a matter of being able to support yourself, and also you have to go through us for approval. That's an important piece. Sometimes bosses will say, sure, you can go on vacation whenever you want, but if the contract says you have to go through us for that to be approved, at the end of the day, it's not really your choice, at least not in writing. Those are some pros of having your own practice, but there are also some cons. I think the biggest con that I hear from people is that it can be very isolating. You're not collaborating as much with people, you're not consulting with people as much, although you certainly should. It's more just a matter of it's not as easily accessible to you. You have fewer institutional resources, you don't have maybe an attorney that you can easily speak with at the agency, or relationships with places at other levels of care that clients might need to be referred to. You can certainly build those things up. It's just not integrated. It's not as seamless for you. You also have a lot more responsibility. And that for me was the hardest part to deal with. When you and you alone are responsible for your caseload, that's a lot of pressure. And, if something goes wrong, if one of your clients starts to develop some sort of risk, you are the one that has to deal with that. And certainly there are things you can say in your informed consent form and so forth around like, I don't provide crisis services, but at the end of the day, that burden is on your shoulders alone to bear. And also something else is that it's harder to build a caseload. If you're at a group practice or an agency, there are already going to be a good amount of referrals coming in. It's a lot slower if you have to build it up from scratch. That's answering the question, is making your own private practice the right choice for you? But what about the timing? Is the timing right? Something that I didn't realize when I started my practice was that you have to already kind of have a presence in the community before starting out if you want referrals. So generally speaking, it is good to have been in a state at least a few years before starting to build up your practice there, because you've already built relationships with coworkers, peers at other institutions. Maybe there are already some word of mouth referrals. And also, is timing right when it comes to the economy? I'm in a lot of like therapist communities, and I hear a lot of talk around how difficult it has been to bring in referrals lately because of presumably the economy, maybe, apps like BetterHelp. It's hard to say what exactly is the cause behind this, but honestly, when I go to the supermarket and I see the price of groceries, I completely understand why someone would not have money to spend on a weekly expense like therapy. So you need to also kind of estimate, are there going to be enough referrals for me to build a caseload at this point in time in this particular place? So you've asked yourself that, you've determined, yes, making my own private practice is the right choice for me and it's the right time to do it. Then you got to decide what's your niche. I was trained pretty generalist in my doctoral program. And so the idea of developing a niche was something that I completely had to figure out as soon as I opened my practice. And it's something that you kind of fine tune over time. It's something that you can definitely tweak. I think sometimes people start off with being very broad and saying like, well, my niche is college students or my niche is couples, but you can get a lot more specific with it. And the way to figure out what your niche is who is your ideal client? So maybe instead of college students, it's college women going through relational issues. Kind of counterintuitive because it's like, well, you would think if you cast a broader net, you have more referrals. But if you cast a broader net, everybody kind of feels like, maybe this is the person for me, maybe they're not. Versus if you're literally describing in your Psychology Today profile, this is the type of client that I work with, and that is exactly the type of client reading it, then they're immediately going to put you at the top of their list as a therapist. Now, when I was creating my own practice, I made myself a checklist because, like I said, I like to have a to-do list. I have to have a very visual map of everything that I'm going to do. And I actually turned this into a PDF that you can download on my website. So right now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to run through everything on that checklist. And you don't need to take notes. If you want that checklist, readily available for you, just hop on my website right now. It's actually at drannayuden.com/disclaimers because I have disclaimers and resources on there. And so right under the disclaimers, there's the PDF. You can download it. It's super easy. It's free. And while you're at it, if you find resources like that helpful, go ahead and sign up for my newsletter as well. So let's run through what this checklist entails. Starting with some legal and professional logistics. Obviously, first things first, you need a professional license or a provisional license. It was called like a pre-license in order to practice. In some states, you need your full licensure, and in others, you don't. And the next step after that is you need to set up a legal business. So you can set up sole proprietorship, or you can set up a PLLC in some states. Maybe you would prefer an LLC or a different type of business. This really depends on your business goals. It depends on do you plan on expanding your practice later on? I would consult with a business attorney or a tax attorney ahead of time to help you decide what's the best option for you. Then you apply for a state business license. I didn't put the link to this because obviously there are 50 states, so you could be in any number of them. Then you need to apply for a city business license. And again, this process is largely going to depend on what city you're actually applying in. And then you're going to need a business bank account. You're going to need your city, state, and business licenses before you have a business bank account. What documents exactly that you need are going to depend bank to bank, and so it's worth calling them ahead of time and asking. But on the topic of the business banking side of this, I want to talk to you about Found, the sponsor of today's video. So if you're like me, one of the biggest cons of going into private practice was dealing with the logistical, specifically financial and accounting aspects. And that's exactly why Found was created, to make self-employment easier so that we can focus on the things we actually love doing rather than the logistical stuff that just fatigues us. Found allows you to keep all your banking, bookkeeping, taxes, and invoicing in one spot, making it a great choice for self-employed business owners. As you get paid in your Found account, Found will auto-calculate an estimate of how much you should be setting aside for taxes. So when you're self-employed, you need to be making an estimated tax every quarter or sometimes even every month, not just once every April. And it can be very difficult to think about, okay, how much exactly do I owe to the city, to the state, federally? So Found actually does that for you. It accounts for that and it automatically puts that money aside. While you use Found's Business Debit MasterCard, the app allows you to track and categorize your business expenses, easily identify write-offs, and maximize your tax savings. You can also use Found to save receipts and easily categorize purchases, easily generate income, expense, and profit and loss reports, create custom sub-accounts called pockets where you can allocate funds to each category, use a business toolkit that helps you get set up with business insurance, and more. So rather than having a bunch of different separate financial apps for banking, bookkeeping, etc., you can consolidate all these countless and costly apps into one place. Found also has an easy sign up, no credit check, and it won't impact your credit score. It has no minimum balance, no hidden fees, no overdraft fees, and no ATM fees, although some ATMs may charge their own fee. You can either use the mobile app or the desktop for access, allowing you to manage your money from anywhere. And you can also get real-time transaction notifications, manage or freeze your card anytime, and you can get cashback rewards with your Found MasterCard debit card. I was also really impressed by just how many thousands of positive reviews they have on Apple's App Store. With Found, you can create an account in minutes and set up the app to do the hard stuff for you so that you can focus on doing the things that you actually love. Use my link for smart and user-friendly banking services, which I will link in both the description box and a pinned comment. So back to the checklist that I was talking about. Obviously, for the business banking side of it, Found can be a great alternative to a lot of the things on this checklist. You're also going to need an employer identification number called an EIN from the IRS. This is kind of like a business version of a social security number. You should also get a national provider identifier or an NPI if you don't already have one. You're going to need your license number for this, and you're also going to need the place where services take place. And so if you are fully telehealth, you need to be very aware that the information you put in this application is going to be in a very public database where anyone can find that address. And forwarding addresses don't count. They don't let you do that. What you can do instead is there are some offices that you can rent and you can go there for however many times a week or month. So technically you can be doing telehealth from that location and you can put that as your address instead. Also going to need malpractice or liability insurance. If you plan on taking insurance, you got to decide which insurances to panel with and start the process because it can be very grueling. You also need to have an informed consent form and intake questionnaires. Depending on the type of portal that you use, like SimplePractice for instance, there are going to be some intake questionnaires already built into there that you can select to include. But the informed consent is very important and it does need to be personalized. It does need to include your own personal information like your approach to therapy, your personal policies, how to contact you. You are legally required to include a HIPAA Notice of Privacy Practices document in the intake forms. Portals like SimplePractice will make sure to include that. And if your clients are not taking insurance, a new law that came out in the past few years is that they will need a good faith estimate before starting out with you. So this is basically for the period of 1 year, how much they can expect to spend on therapy with you. And if you go over that amount, then they can technically dispute it. So it can seem kind of scary giving people an estimation that they're going to need to spend however many thousands of dollars if they're not using insurance. You can make sure to tell them when you're having the phone screening or at the first meeting that this is the most they can expect to pay, but it's absolutely not something that they have to pay if they decide to pull out of therapy. It's also very important to get your consent forms looked over by an attorney. Personally, I reached out to somebody who's also an attorney and a clinician, and it was super easy. He didn't overcharge me. He just looked over my forms over email, modified them, and then just invoiced me for how much it was. Of course, yeah, like anytime you deal with an attorney, it's going to be a little bit of an expense, but there really is no way around it. Also going to need to figure out how to do your bookkeeping. Once your business is registered, you should receive a letter instructing you how often you're going to need to pay taxes. Many places for the first year won't need to owe quarterly taxes, but some might even want you to pay monthly, or at least to file monthly, if not to actually pay monthly. And so again, Found can be a very valuable tool for the bookkeeping aspect. If you can't use Found for any reason and you're not well versed in this, I would definitely consult with an accountant and or a bookkeeper. This one's important because you're going to be on your own in private practice. It's arguably even more important to have a strong consultation team. This doesn't have to be like a formal team that meets every week or anything like that. It could just be maybe like a group chat of therapists who, when you have a consultation question, you reach out to and you can talk. Consultation is, from what I hear, like the single most important thing for protecting your license, because any decision that you make clinically, if another therapist can say in court, yeah, I consulted with them about this and I thought it was the right decision, that's going to cover you. And also just because, it's important to keep up with different research and learn from other people in the field. I know so many therapists who go into private practice and just completely stop learning and are just regurgitating the same like 3 or 4 skills that they learned 20 years ago. You can find consultation groups through things like therapist Facebook pages. You can create your own based on relationships you've built with other therapists, or you can even pay for group or individual supervision if that's something you want to do. It would probably count as a business expense. Depending on your license, you're probably going to need to do some sort of continued education every year, so make sure you keep up with those. Sometimes they have specific requirements like suicide prevention or ethics and so forth. Anytime a legal concern comes up in your practice, make sure to consult with your insurance's attorneys. These aren't people that are going to be like representing you or anything like that. They're just people that are there meant to cover your bases if you have a legal or professional issue that you want consultation about. But do be sure not to violate HIPAA during these consultations, because HIPAA information is still private, so don't get that specific with them. Now, as for the marketing and communication aspects, I think it's important to have a professional headshot. Honestly, I still don't have one. I just booked a professional photo shoot for when I go to Romania in June. The ones I have right now is just like my husband took of me with his iPhone, and it doesn't cut it. It's not good enough. I know when I'm looking at a therapist website and I see a professional headshot, it just looks so crisp. It feels so professional. It's like, this is somebody who clearly has their marketing down, and I respect it. You're also going to need a blurb about your therapeutic approach. You're going to put this in your informed consent. You're going to put this in your Psychology Today bio or other sorts of bios in these therapist databases. Also want to talk about who your ideal client is, the presenting concerns and populations that you want to work with. You're going to need to decide what your rate is. You can sort of get a sense of what's the typical rate in your zip code by looking up other providers in Psychology Today, or you can calculate how much you need after accounting for expenses, or consider any other relevant experience that you may have when deciding how much you're going to charge. You're going to need to create a website through something like Squarespace, or I know there are other options as well. Squarespace is what I used. It's pretty user-friendly. It took me a while to sort of figure out, but once I did, I feel like I really got it down. Really important, make sure that your website is actually indexed on Google. And this part is really complicated. My husband had to really help me with it. And I don't understand why it's as complicated as it is. But let's say that you're doing therapy with adolescents, for instance, adolescent boys, and it says on your website, therapy for adolescent boys, and you're thinking, well, this is surely going to pop up on Google. No, you have to index it manually in order for it to pop up on Google. And even then, there's something called search engine optimization, SEO, that will determine how close to the top of that list you're going to pop up for those keywords. So I'm just going to be real with you. It might be helpful if you're not very tech savvy to have somebody handle the SEO for you. Or even the creation of the website. If you have a contact form on your website, do make sure it's HIPAA compliant. If it goes to your email, then that email also needs to be HIPAA compliant. Or something else you can do is you can put some sort of Google form on there that's HIPAA compliant. This again was a complicated process that I needed to consult with other people on, so seek consultation as necessary. Like I said, you do also need a HIPAA compliant email. Again, this is like technologically more advanced than what I understand, but speak to somebody who does understand it. You're also going to need a HIPAA compliant phone number separate from your personal number for your own sake. So Google Voice is a good way of doing it, and if you buy a Google Workspace, you can ensure that that is HIPAA compliant. This is sort of optional, but I think is important for work-life boundaries. Getting a laptop that's specific to work that you can put away, and make sure to count that as a business expense through something like Found. And then of course, once you have your website, you have everything set up, you put that blurb about the way you do therapy into directories such as Psychology Today, Therapy Den, Mental Health Match. There are a number of them. Please make sure to check if any of them have 6 months off for free. For instance, I know that at the time that I made mine, Psychology Today had that. But it's not easily advertised. So if you want to make sure that you're getting referrals for free those first 6 months, make sure to double check if there are any promo codes or codes from other therapists who could refer you, and that way they get a little bit of it too. Then you also have to decide which HIPAA compliant portal to use. I just kind of used the one that my supervisor at the time recommended, and looking back, it wasn't the best option for me because it wasn't the most cost effective. So consult with other therapists first about their experiences, the cost, the user friendliness, any other considerations, and then of course upload all your forms onto there, figure out how to use it, play around with some like sample clients at first. And once that is done, you are ready to start seeing clients. You're also going to need to decide how and when to collect pay, and this also should be HIPAA compliant. You're going to need to decide how to screen clients. Some people want to do 10-15 minute phone call. Other people want to actually do like a 15-minute Zoom meeting first. Some people don't like doing them at all. If you are going to do them, which honestly I personally do prefer, you're going to need to have a sense of like what are the different questions you want to hit to assess if this is the right person for you. Verifying the state where they're located, assessing goodness at fit, things like that. Something that can be helpful, especially in the early stages of your practice when you maybe have more free time on your hands, is to start building up your own referral list. And so I actually created a spreadsheet of my own when I was starting out with my practice so that I could refer clients who maybe weren't a good fit or needed other types of resources or I was full for. And then lastly, network with other local therapists. Reach out to people through the directories or through their website or through colleagues of colleagues. Meet over Zoom, grab some coffee, share resources. These relationships do add up over time. Yeah, those were the main points that I tried to hit when creating my own therapy practice. I hope that this was helpful. Don't forget to check out Found if you're an entrepreneur who could benefit from their services. It's free to get started and only takes a few minutes to sign up. So it's definitely worth checking out if you already have a business banking provider or you don't. All right, take care.